It's 6 p.m. on a Friday here in Korea. Welcome to our newscast. I'm Daniel Che. Let us begin with the headlines. President Park Geun-hye highlighted the need to focus on creating quality tour packages that allow visitors more ways to immerse themselves in Korean culture, as she announced a new set of measures to improve cultural tourism. Seoul's current account surplus with Beijing dips more than 20% in a year. Experts say it's time for a change in Korea's export strategy, as China accounts for around a quarter of shipments out of the country. Tributes continues to pour in for Joe Cox, the opposition Labour Party lawmaker who died in an attack Thursday. Some analysts predict the passing of the beloved politician who campaigned for Britain to remain in the EU may halt pro-Brexit momentum. The Korean government announced a set of plans for improving the country's tour programs. President Park Geun-hye ordered officials to focus on quality over quantity and put the tourist experience at the forefront of their plans. Song Ji-sun starts us off with a rough draft for plans to better cater to the needs of foreign visitors.
President Park Geun-hye described tourism as a mixture of culture, transportation, and infrastructure mixed with Korean hospitality. Speaking at a forum launched Friday to improve cultural tourism, President Park said the focus now should not be on the numbers but the quality of the country's tourism programs. She said the ultimate goal should be a tourism environment that's free of complaints, which she said can be accomplished by rooting out bad practices like grift, and that there's room for an upgrade as tourist programs or attractions are often not very diverse.
제일 마음속에 남는 거는 그 나라 국민의 친절이라고 생각합니다. 관광객의 만족도를 높이고 또 지출액도 늘리고 재방문율도 높이는 이런 질적 측면에 초점을 맞춰서 체계적인 정책 추진을 해야 하겠습니다.
The president highlighted creativity and innovation as essential to revamping the industry. She ordered the creation of new tourism content through storytelling based on features unique to each region to attract visitors from overseas. The government aims to increase the tourism market to $48 billion by next year and will support the expansion of the sector through deregulation. It will also launch a new commission to help deepen integration and synergy between relevant ministries and industries. The president noted that tourism creates 50% as many jobs as manufacturing and urged those present to foster the sector as a way to boost domestic spending and youth job creation. Song Ji-sun, Arirang News.
Korea's ruling Saenuri Party has descended into bitter infighting yet again. This time, the battle is over a decision to take back a handful of lawmakers to jump ship in the run-up to the April general elections. Ji Myung-gil gives us an inside look at the issue.
Lawmakers within the pro-President Park Geun-hye faction of the ruling Saenuri Party are furious the party's innovation committee gave 7 independent lawmakers the green light to rejoin the party without consulting them first. The lawmakers left the party after failing to win nominations for a recent general election. At the center of the deepening division is former floor leader Yoo Seung-min, who the party has widely blamed for triggering the internal feud by being overly vocal about his disagreements with the president. Moderates within the party admit the decision was inevitable, but said it was done behind their backs and too quickly. But other lawmakers outside the pro-President Park circle say the decision was fair because the committee had held a vote. On the other side of the political spectrum, the main opposition Minju Party of Korea expressed concern about the deepening factional rift.
It's a serious problem that the ruling party is embroiled in an internal feud. The government is also incompetent in dealing with the current economic crisis. The ruling party should look into this matter but is distracted by their own internal problems.
The minor opposition People's Party called for the resumption of a high-level meeting among government bodies, the ruling party, and the presidential office.
Three-way talks must be held in order to look after the people's livelihoods and discuss matters related to corporate restructuring. The three should coordinate on pending issues at the meeting so they can discuss the issues with the opposition parties.
Speculation is high that the ruling party will resolve the issue soon. as they need to prepare for the upcoming convention in August, where they will choose new party leaders to replace the current interim leadership structure. Kim Young-gil, Arirang News.
Turning to national defense now, the South Korean Navy is conducting a maritime exercise to better defend the Western Sea border against possible North Korean provocations. Kim Hyun-bin takes us to the thick of the action.
20 warships, including the 7,600-ton Aegis destroyer, are sailing along in sync, patrolling the maritime boundary between the two Koreas, in search of signs of possible provocations from North Korea. When a North Korean patrol boat is spotted on the horizon, the commander orders the ship to be destroyed. Sailors and warships immediately get into battle formation, aim for their target, and fire. Bullseye. P-3 surveillance planes and Lynx anti-submarine helicopters are dispatched to search for a possible second attack from the north. It's all part of a battle simulation on the Western Sea border, and comes at a time when North Korean patrol boats often appear in the area. There have been several naval skirmishes along the northern limit line in recent years, 1999, 2002, and 2009, with dozens left dead or injured. The previous two clashes occurred in the month of June. The South Korean Navy says it is ready for any provocations from the north.
If North Korea launches a provocation along the northern limit line, it will become their grave. Our military is ready to move swiftly, accurately, and forcefully against any provocations.
The three-day exercise runs through Saturday. Kim Hyun-bin, Arirang News.
Over in the United States, there are additional efforts to further tighten the noose on North Korea. A recently approved bill moves lawmakers a step closer to redesignating North Korea as a state sponsor of terrorism. Kwon So-hwa tells us more.
The 2014 cyber attack on Sony Pictures, hackings into South Korean agencies, as well as the bombing of a South Korean passenger jet, a case that goes all the way back to the 1980s. These are among 21 terror acts subject to re-examination as to whether North Korea should be redesignated as a state sponsor of terrorism by the U.S. On Thursday, a bill was approved by a House committee which calls for the State Department to report to Congress on the issue within 90 days, and then it has to pass the full House and Senate. U.S. Congressman Ted Poe, who proposed the bill, says when Pyongyang was taken off the list in 2008, it was for, quote, completely diplomatic reasons. Currently, Iran, Sudan, and Syria are designated as terror-sponsoring nations. Cuba has been excluded since last year. Kwon So-hwa, Arirang News.
South Korea's current account surplus with China is heading downhill, and that could mean trouble as Beijing accounts for about a quarter of Korea's total exports. Kim Min-ji explains why Seoul may need a new export strategy.
Korea's current account surplus with China is on a downward spiral. According to the Bank of Korea, the country's current account surplus with China came to $45.1 billion last year. That's down by almost 20% from a year ago and marks the second straight year of decline after a record high in 2013. Still, China makes up over 40% of Korea's total current account surplus, which sat at $105.8 billion last year. The central bank says a drop in exports of chemical products and display panels to China led the decline in the goods account surplus, while the service account surplus has also shrunk. On top of that, the Chinese government is shifting away from an investment-led growth model to one led by domestic consumption, giving Korean exporters a hard time. Data shows that Korea's exports to China came to $38.1 billion between January and April, down over 16% from the year before.
It's been a while since China has implemented changes to its economic structure, but Korea hasn't been able to keep up to target the consumption market effectively. Korea also needs to develop more consumer goods, as major export items still consist of raw materials or intermediary products.
But experts warn it won't be easy going due to the rising competitiveness of Chinese rivals, so they say Korea should focus on areas where it has a competitive edge, such as cosmetics, cultural content, and pharmaceuticals. They also urge Korea to diversify its export partners, as China's growth is expected to continue to slow. 김민지, Arirang News.
The government is planning to unleash more measures to step up economic growth. It all points to a possible injection of a supplementary budget in the second half of the year. HWANG Ji-hye takes a look at the finance minister's comments and what it implies.
It was just earlier this year that Finance Minister Yoo Il-ho wiped out expectations of a new extra budget being introduced this year. But on Friday, he in effect turned around his comments while expressing the government's resolve to put the economy back on track for solid recovery.
Facing downside risk like sluggish exports and domestic demand, we will try to breathe new life into each sector and think about ways the government can take a more active role with its finances in revving up the economy.
Yu's remarks came during a meeting with heads of major institutions where he talked about how the government should run the economy in the second half of this year. With that, there's growing belief that the minister is signaling an extra budget may be back on the table as conditions at home and abroad remain sluggish. Exports have plunged for almost a year and a half. Domestic demand is showing little sign of gaining momentum due to snowballing household debt and the government's recent corporate restructuring drive that will cause inevitable and massive job losses. The central bank's recent rate cut to a historic low of 1.25% is also adding to speculation of a supplementary budget.
We cannot escape the current slow growth and weakening growth potential simply with our monetary policy.
Concerns still remain that the extra budget could worsen the country's fiscal soundness, but calls for the government to pump more cash into the economy is winning more support as uncertainties stemming from a possible rate hike by the U.S. Fed and the UK referendum next week on whether to stay in the European Union are posing more threats to the economy. HWANG Ji-hye, Arirang News.
Volkswagen's German headquarters reportedly gave the order to install emissions cheating software in cars sold in Korea. Seoul's prosecutor said there was a deliberate attempt to circumvent regulations. KWON Jang-ho has the updates on the VW scandal.
Seoul's prosecutors revealed on Friday that Volkswagen's German headquarters not only knew that its vehicles sold in Korea were rigged with emissions cheating software, but also ordered the installation of such software after failing a series of emissions tests. A director of Volkswagen Korea was called in for questioning earlier this week, and subsequently the investigation found the order to install the cheat device had come from Germany. The current investigation relates to some 1,500 units of the gasoline-fueled Golf model that were sold from March last year. Previously, it had failed Korea's emissions tests for a year, which uses stringent US regulations as its benchmark. The car maker cited various causes from miscalibrated settings to faulty sensor connections before ordering its Korean branch to switch the car software without informing Korean authorities. The car then passed a test in November of 2014 and came to the market 5 months later. This is the latest development in Korea's ongoing battle with Volkswagen since last year, when the car maker was found to have cheated emissions tests in its diesel cars. Korea's authorities recently rejected Volkswagen's recall plans on those cars for a third time, saying that there was still no official acknowledgement that they had used the cheat devices. A group of Volkswagen customers also filed a lawsuit against Volkswagen's former CEO last week, along with 11 other executives. KWON Jang-ho, Arirang News.
Seoul prosecutors have announced that they will indict the former chief of Oxy Korea without detention next week and wrap up their investigation. The Seoul Central District Prosecutor's Office said Friday John Lee will be charged with not taking the proper measures even after receiving complaints from customers over the side effects of a toxic humidifier sterilizer. He is also accused of false advertising after he said the product was safe for children even though its safety had not been confirmed. This comes after the Seoul Central District Court rejected an arrest warrant sought for Lee, saying that the evidence compiled thus far is not strong enough to justify his arrest. The Korean-American, who is currently the head of Google Korea, served as the chief of Oxy's Korea branch for 5 years from 2005. And the humidifier sterilizer in question was blamed for the deaths of around 100 people and serious illnesses, among many others. Turning to other parts of our world, tributes to the British Member of Parliament Joe Cox, who died after being stabbed and shot, have been pouring in from all around the world. Campaigning for next week's EU referendum has been postponed following the tragedy. Lee Min-young zooms in on the death of a politician who was a strong advocate of standing up against the idea of Brexit.
Hundreds of people packed into a church in Birstall, West Yorkshire on Thursday evening for a vigil for Labour Party lawmaker Jo Cox, who died after being shot and stabbed in the street. Colleagues described her as a dedicated internationalist, a passionate human rights activist, and was known for her work on women's issues.
Jo fought to help the refugees from the Syrian civil war, and she gave a voice to those whose cry for help she felt was not being heard. It changed attitudes, and I know it contributed to a change in policy. She will never know how many lives she helped transform.
Labour leader Jeremy Corbyn offered his condolences to the victim's family.
She leaves behind a husband, a wonderful man who likewise spends his life campaigning for human rights and justice. And she leaves behind two young children who will never grow up to see their mum again. They can be proud of what she was, they can be proud of what she did, and they can be very proud of everything that she stood for.
Husband Brendan Cox urged people to, quote, fight against the hatred that killed her, saying that she believed in a better world and she fought for it every day of her life. Mrs. Cox was a vocal supporter of Britain remaining in the European Union. With the nation in shock, both sides of EU referendum debate have suspended campaigning until the weekend out of respect. The incident has stirred up speculation that it could bolster the pro-EU Remain campaign, while in recent days has fallen behind the Leave camp in opinion polls, even though analysts say the impact on the June 23rd referendum is unclear. Lee Min-young, Arirang News.
That's all the time we have for this hour's newscast. As always, thank you for watching.